Changes have happened. There's a car park out there now, but generally everything else looks the same. Brings back fond memories. I was a flexi student. I think it took me 5 years to get my diploma. I took a year off halfway through, and then just went part-time as well. Just that old, I think, are you guys all flexi?
Yeah, pretty
much. The old balancing act, of trying to live life, work and study. Always very complex. So Ruth has asked me to come in and share with you guys on kind of the ministry that I'm involved in and how I've used counselling as part of this ministry. I'm not a practicing counsellor, but I use a lot of the theories and stuff that I learnt here in the work that I do. I live in a neighbourhood called Ramwood Park, which you can kind of see a little map there. Doesn't really show a lot. It's not kind of that important. It's in Manurewa. Manurewa is a suburb of Auckland, South Auckland. It's one of the biggest cities in New Zealand. It's 95,000 people, mainly made up of Māori and Pacific Island. Ramwood Park is one of those suburbs that is on the corner. On the right-hand side there, you can see a line that's all farmland. At the bottom there's a stream that goes through, and on the left-hand side is this State Highway 1. So it's kind of right on the fringe of Manurewa. And inside there's about 6,500 people, 35% Māori, 35% Pacific Island, around about 20% Indian, and then there's the rest of us. Very unusual to see a European. To be seriously, when I'm driving around and I see a European walking around, I'm kind of like, oh, it's another one of me. It's just not there. Okay, there's a few families, but not many. It's a Decile 1 area, so we all know Decile 1 and how that all works. It's an area that has a reputation, and when we first came to Manurewa, my wife and I've got 3 kids, 3 teenagers, 19, 17, 15, yeah, got that right. My wife is Māori, she's Ngāti Porou, and sometimes she'll whisper Ngāpuhi as well. If you guys know the history, you'll know why, it's a whisper. And so we were searching for a place to come in and live. As part of our ministry, which I'm involved in, which is called Urban Neighbours of Hope, we believe that it's really important to live in the same neighbourhood that you're trying to work within, around a community development model. So what I'm going to talk about today is kind of how we did that and a community development model, which I think is a model that is talked a lot about, but not actually used a lot. But it's actually a really important model in terms of sustaining change in a community. So when we first came, we were looking. There's 3 places in New Zealand that have high poverty. One is Gisborne, and we lived in Gisborne for 10 years. Did a whole lot of work in the community around there. One is Whangarei, sort of up north, and the other place is South Auckland. So we came to South Auckland, exploring, asked some questions. We realised that we had a better understanding of things Māori and a very little understanding about things Pacific Island. Very different cultures, very different worldview. And so we looked for a place in South Auckland that had more Māori in it, and we found this place. It's an interesting neighbourhood. On my street, I know where there's 2 tini houses. I know where there's a P-Lab just further down. I know where the Black Power are, where some of the Mongrel Mob are in the same neighbourhood. 3 months ago, one of the Black Power shot one of the Killer Bees, which is another gang that lives more over in Otara. It was a deliberate hit on him because there was a drug deal that had gone wrong. Shot him in the leg. I know a whole lot of stuff about our neighbourhood, and it's one of those things that sometimes I feel like I'm in a Hollywood movie, and the gang kind of stuff that you see on those movies. But this is not Hollywood. This is real life. And to be honest, I've been quite shocked at the poverty that I've seen in our neighbourhood, and I've been quite shocked at the violence that is around. Just a couple of days ago, I could hear domestic violence happening 3 or 4 houses down. The screams, the shouts, the smashed windows, and the hitting that was going on. And unfortunately, that can be for us quite a common thing that happens. I've had to ask myself the question, so what is poverty? What's going on? And I just think of some stories that kind of help explain it. So I've got a friend who lives to further down in our neighbourhood, and I got to know him. I'm an ex-school teacher, and he came to me because he wanted to learn how to read. 35-year-old, reading at about 6.5 years old with his reading level. And he came to me, and we started to explore how to do a reading program together. And after a while, we had enough of a relationship for him to tell me his story. And I asked him, how come you can't read? And he, I just want you to imagine what it would be like not to be able to read. He couldn't go on the internet. He couldn't read the newspaper. And for my mate, when he goes down to WINS to get the benefit, he's got to take his 12-year-old daughter with him so that she can read the forms, show him where to sign, and tell him what to do. There's a whole lot of shame that comes with that. I mean, WINS is a horrible place to go. We line up to WINS. We deliberately take a valve of poverty with Urban Neighbours Hope. It's a mission order. And partly the reason for that is, one, if you live simply, it releases more resources that you can pour in other areas. But two, it just gives you the experience that lots of our neighbours go through. So we'd never lined up with WINS before. That's horrible. They don't treat you. They don't treat you well. And I asked him why. What had gone on? Why he couldn't read? And he just said that when he was a kid, he left school at 13. So I'm still old-fashioned, 3rd form, what's that, year 9. And he had been to 11 primary schools beforehand. Oh, wow, that's a lot. Why? His family had to move because they were involved in the gangs and they were always on the move, away from who's after them or towards a new deal. And I just realised that he'd never sat in one classroom long enough with one teacher to learn the strategies of how to read. He just had never had the opportunity. And I think of another story of another friend of mine. Loves Jesus, but he's an alcoholic. And one day I went to see him, and I knocked on the door and he yelled, "Come in." And I walked in and I was hit with this incredible smell of human crap. And I was like, "Whoa, what was going on?" And I went in and he had lost control of his body fluids, and there was stuff all over the floors, which helped him clean up. And he's really shameful of that day. And he's told me his story that when he was a kid, he had a heart problem, and he loves putting up his shirt and showing off his beer belly, but also the big scar that's down here. And so he went to hospital for this heart operation. And they opened him up and fixed it up, but his mum never came to visit him. And the social worker said, "Well, if you don't go and visit your son in hospital, we're going to have to get SIS involved and remove your kids." So mum went. For the wrong motivations, but she went. A kid equals a certain amount of dollars under the support. But when she came to visit, her parting words were, "Boy, I wish you had died of that operating." Now, this guy, he's in his 70s, and he's drunk all his life, and he's drunk because the pain that's inside of him has just been so much that alcohol is the only way he can quench it. It's the only way he can hold it. It's the only way that he can contain it. And then it becomes a pattern, and it becomes a lifestyle. And when I think about my neighbourhood, there are stories after stories after stories like that. And a lot of times I see the common stuff about it is they're all kids when it started. And they had no power over what happened to them. They had no control over what happened. Yet they wear the scars of what the adults did around them. And so when I think of poverty, and that's kind of one angle of poverty. If we know our New Zealand history, there's another angle that has to do with justice. And I think about my life and the way I was brought up, and I had a great mum and dad who thought education was really important, put me through the best schools, helped me find a pathway to Teachers Training College, helped me to find a job, great holidays. We weren't wealthy, but we were good. And I just think, well, what does God kind of say about that? And what I've realised, when you understand the history of New Zealand and you understand what many, many people go through, is that my well-being is being built on the injustice of our country. Me as a European live in a system, which I don't have time to unpack with you, but I live in a system that works for me. The education system works for me, the health system works for me, the political system works for me, and I benefit from it. But at a cost. At a cost of the history of laws that were passed over the years that pulled down the Indigenous people of our country, and it took away. And so poverty to me is about a lack of choices. You just don't have the choices for whatever the reason is. I have lots of choices. I can choose this, that, and a whole lot of things because I have an education, I have an upbringing. I don't have the echoes and the nightmares of my past that pull me down. I'm European. I can walk into a bank and get a loan without being asked 1,000 questions. Or my wife will talk about when she used to get a shot, she would be followed. When she was at school, and she chose deliberately not to study Māori because in the system back then it was Māori were dumb and your grades all got dropped at school C level if you took Māori, and she's got documents to prove that kind of stuff. So I don't have to carry that kind of stuff. The system works for me, but for many, many of our neighbours, the system doesn't work. And when I think of poverty, I think of Jesus, and I like to always go back to Scripture, because a central theme in right through Scripture is about justice. And it's about the oppressed. And it's about God's heart for the poor. In fact, there's over 2,000 Bible verses around this whole thing. It's actually one of the most central themes right through. Even more so than salvation, which is interesting in terms of how many Bible verses there are. But I just think of one. Jesus hung out with those in his culture. And I just think of this one about Jesus heals a man with leprosy. And it comes from Luke 5, verses 12 to 15. When Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell on his face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you're willing, can you make me clean?" Jesus reached out his hand, touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. And then Jesus ordered him, "Don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priests, and after the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing, as a testimony to them." Yet the news about him spread all the more, so the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sickness. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Now I'm absolutely intrigued by this story. If we understand leprosy back in Jesus' time, leprosy isolated you from everything. If you had the signs of leprosy, you knew what was coming. You did everything you could to hide it. Because as soon as your family knew you had leprosy, as soon as the community knew you had leprosy, you were withdrawn. You could no longer be associated with healthy people. Why? Because there's the fear that that someone else would catch it. It's a contagious disease. And the fear was huge back then. And so this leper had been pulled out. Now he's a guy. So he had been withdrawn from his wife and from his family. He could no longer hug or play with his kids. Not only that, he'd also been withdrawn from work. And he'd been withdrawn from belonging to a community. He was isolated, he was away. Desperate place, full of shame. I don't know, I can't imagine what it'd be like not to be able to touch someone. Not to be able to find work. Not because I can't and stuff, but just because nobody wants me. To be totally rejected. And to be yelled at if I try to enter the village, and to have stones thrown at me, told to get lost. And it's interesting that the way Jesus responded to him after he heard the call is that he touched him. The one thing this man needed was to be touched. And Jesus did it. And the healing came. The other thing that I always find fascinating with Jesus is that right around him, everywhere he went, there was sickness. Everywhere. There was this desperate thing happening, and the needs were just huge. And I think in my community, the needs are huge. I mean, if I started telling you story after story, and if I try to respond to it, I'd be burnt out within 6 months. Just about impossible. But it's fascinating that Jesus only tended to respond to people who were sick when they reached out to him first. I think there's 3 examples of where he moved out of compassion. One of them is the widow who had lost her husband and her son. And his compassion, I think he knew that she would be forced into a lifestyle that was terrible, because without a male in your life back in those days, things got pretty desperate. But generally speaking, he only reached out when, first of all, those that were in need made an effort to come to him. And there's story after story after story about that. That's the second point that's really important, especially as a principle for community development and for counselling and for social work. The third bit, which I'm absolutely fascinated about, is that Jesus then sent the leper, after he'd been cleaned, back to the priest. And for a while I had to scratch my head. I couldn't work out, why would he do that? Really interesting. See, Jesus knew the religious and the political system of his time. He really understood what was going on. And he knew that unless the leper went to the priest and got the stamp of approval that he was healed, nobody would accept the leper. And he would be in a worse position than he was before. Because he'd be healed, but not accepted back into the community. He'd be healed, but couldn't go back to his family. You get that? Okay? So Jesus knew the system. He knew how it worked, and he used it. And so this guy went back to the priest, got the stamp, and then he was welcomed back into his community, back as a dad, back as a husband, back as a functioning person in his village. And the question that I have to ask is, what is it? Because we have a whole lot of people who are isolated from the resources that are around us. What is it that will set people free from the poverty that we have? And that's a question I'm asking. Any answers? What will set people free?
A change in the system?
Yeah, but define that.
Okay.
Yeah?
Being able to access that help with people around them.
Yep. So what kind of resources do they need to access?
They need to, well, I think if it, I'm just grabbing out of here specifics, but, you know, they need food, they need help.
What sort of help?
Well, to be who they're meant to be.
So define that.
I think they need help to find the answers within themselves. Because a lot of them do have the answers. It's how they use things. you know,
Yep.
there's a skill set there, sometimes it's a matter of unlocking it.
Yep.
I've seen people that I've helped with volunteering.
So you can unlock the idea, like the leper. The leper was unlocked, he was cleaned.
Mm.
But he tried to enter the system, and if he tried to enter the system without going through the right ways,
You don't get anything.
he wouldn't have gotten anywhere. So what happens to a lot of people that we're working with, where we pray for them, they become saved, they become released, but they still can't enter the
The
system.
system.
They still can't enter in to grab the resources that they need, so their family can function.
So it comes to knowledge.
Knowledge and education.
Yep.
It's a big miles.
Giving them the ability to make their choices.
Yep.
They can make
So what do people need to be able to do that? To be able to stand up and to be able to make your own choices.
Helping them, helping them find work
So
give them skills,
employment.
employment, and give them skills that they need to earn the income to pay.
So in Mandarewa last year, Pack and Save opened up, brand new Pack and Save. Okay, I mean Auckland's growing. It's like Tauranga, but it's just growing massive. So this new shopping centre opened up. 150 positions went. 2,500 people applied for it. Okay, and they lined up in a massive line to come and hand their CV in. So 2,500 people want to work,
There's not enough jobs.
but there's no work there.
Unless you could create within their community an environment where they could be self-employed or
You see, for people to start to enter into the education system, there is a whole lot of things that are needed, because there are echoes, there are memories of their own time at school and their own failures. So for someone like this morning, it's crazy. This morning I was at a meeting with Auckland Council, and they jacked up the push for this term, and this is kind of how government works, is social enterprise. So they got this great idea, we want to develop businesses and stuff that are in communities so people can become self-sufficient. So they said, well, I've got this great idea. What we're going to do is run these courses. And I said, cool. So who are you targeting? Is it middle class for that? Or is it the working class? Or is it the unemployed? I mean, who saw that program last week around poverty and the gap? Because it's defined today, the super rich, the struggling middle class, the poor working class, and the unemployed. So who are you targeting? And he went, oh yeah, good question. I'm not sure about that one. I said, because if you're targeting those that are unemployed, and I'm guessing that's probably who you are, to ask them to step into a classroom situation, hold on. We've taken a massive jump, and actually we need lots of small steps. And you want to start this program next month, and you've asked us to come and do it.
And the funding will last for a year.
Sorry?
And the funding will last for a year.
Maybe 3.
Yeah.
It's normally 3 years.
So time frames.
And so one of the things that I've learned around community development is that is to start to go back to people and to start to tell stories. So narrative therapy is great. If you get the chance to specialise in that with your studies, do so. Because what I find is that everyone has stories. And they have stories about success. And they have stories about being proud of their kids. And they have dreams about what they want to see for their family. And if you can create a space where people can start to tell those stories, especially in a group, because what happens in a group is that I hear that person's stories and it triggers off a whole lot of stories for me. And so when it comes to my turn, I suddenly grab what that person said and that person said, and I remember my time. And then once, if you're a great facilitator, you can actually start to take the gems out of all the stories, put them together, and then together you can start to work out a plan of how do we actually use those gems in our own lives. You don't actually have to do too much work in that because they'll go home and the brain starts going ding, 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 ding. You know, when I hold up a cup of water, is it half full, half empty? From what I heard this morning. Okay? So we choose. Do we see it as half full of issues and problems, like what I got presented when I first went to Randall Park? Or is it full of memories? The memories of a village, Is it half full, not half empty? Here's a great saying. Go to the people, live with them, learn from them, love them. Start with what they know, which is what someone said. Build with what they have. But with the best leaders, when the work is all done, the task accomplished, the people will say, we have done this ourselves.
Mm.
Anyone know when this was written?
2000 BC?
500 BC. This is when this guy, Chinese guy died. Okay? We're only just starting to get what he
Yeah,
was
sense
talking about.
community.
Only just now. Okay? You see, the Ministry of Social Development, which is a huge funder in our community, they give contracts out all the time.
Mm.
You guys are training to be social workers and to be counsellors, and you're going to enter into this world of contracts, which is an interesting world.
Mm.
Now, here's what happens with contracts. How do you get money from Ministry of Social Development to show that whatever you want, the kind of work you want to do, is a worthwhile cause to fund? And you'll be, if you present your case, you'll get a 3-year contract, gives you 3 years of worth of work. This is what generally we work on. We work on a needs deficiency model. Okay? So this is what we do. We try and paint the worst picture that we possibly can about an area, because the better it is, the more funding you're going to get. It's basically the basic philosophy of it.
Mm.
Okay? Okay, so I was in a meeting last month with the senior lieutenant, I think he was, of the police. I can't remember, he's in charge anyway. And he said, look, Dave, for Ramwood Park, because there's a massive need to have more kind of health services come in, we've got to tell everyone how bad Ramwood Park is. So Dave, can you start giving me stories about it? Oh yeah, okay, interesting. Because this is what it does. This is the pattern that you go through around this model. First of all, you identify what the problem is. So these are people who live outside of the community, usually professionals. Identify what the problem is. The second thing you do is, usually it's our heart that defines what the need is. So we'll hear stories, and I can tell you lots of stories that will move your heart, tear to your eye. And it is a heart thing that's happening in our neighbourhood. When we first moved in there, we had about 10 people knock on our door, ask for food parcels or ask for money. We said no, because the line would just get longer and longer and longer. And what does it actually do for people's self-esteem? There is a church that comes down and hands out, does a bread run. Okay, and so we went down at first because we wanted to meet some of the neighbours, and it's quite an interesting story. Actually, I met Jesus at this bread run. What happened is that I was in the line, I was at the back and just chatting to neighbours, and you move forward slowly till you get the chance to bread, and there's these 3 older women telling dirty jokes. And it's always more funny when old lady tells them, especially ones with beards. And I just can't resist saying, I'm only listening to the jokes, not telling them, of course, only listening to the jokes. So we're cracking up, and then I turn around to get my bread, and it's all gone. Sorry, Dave, you missed out. Sweetie, it's okay. So I turn back to hear more jokes, and 2 older mums come up, and they saw that I'd missed out. And they took out of their basket, they gave me a loaf each. And I went home with 2 loaves. And I was pretty moved by that. The generosity from, blessed are the poor, for the kingdom of God is theirs. What was shown there was Jesus. I actually felt like I'd met Jesus that night. I can't remember who gave me the bread, but that's what it was like. So there are these amazing stories that happen. But back to this, okay? Our heart defines the needs. So we hear these stories, our heart defines what's going on. And then we sit with a group of professionals and we start to brainstorm for solutions, and we work out what all the solutions need to be. And what happens next is we try to fix it. What are we doing?
Yeah, it's not going to work.
It's usually called rescuing.
Yeah.
And then we develop an action plan, and it's usually done around outcomes. You have specific outcomes which you show to MSD, and MSD will approve of those outcomes. And then after 3 years, after each year, you have to write a report to show how you're meeting those outcomes. Usually they're based around numbers. You've got to have a certain amount of numbers that come through your books, okay? And you can tick them off. It's all a tick box kind of system. Implement the plans with the reporting. I would argue that this model is doing more damage to our world than we care to actually say. And in fact, if you do say it, you are radical and you'll be shot down quickly. Okay? I think we need to move to this model. It's called an asset model. And sometimes it's called ABCD, so it's asset-based community development. Sometimes it's called strength-based, so it's a little bit different than strength-based. But first of all, we need to acknowledge what's already there in the community. We need to envision what could be based on what is already working, determine what should be, and together work on it and appreciate what is already there. Now, I am weekly absolutely blown away by the creativity that's in this Decile 1 gang-infested, P-labbed, tinny houses of what happens. For instance, there's a mum that I met last month. She has 9 kids, solo mum. Her son has just returned from Malaysia with a gold medal around his neck for being super light under 18 kickbox champ.
Wow.
She raised $2,000 to send them,
Oh, wow.
selling hangies and selling sausages.
Oh.
Now, she has, for some, we just write a check and there you go, see son. This woman has worked out how do I balance looking after 9 kids, as well as going down to the TAB to sell my sausages, as well as, and then when I went round to peel some kumaras with her, there's all these neighbours that came over, and she's peeling all this, and I go, wow, this woman has an incredible gift of thinking. There's another guy who he creates a little bit of extra income for himself. He buys a packet of cigarettes, doesn't smoke them, and he sells them, each one. He makes $20 out of a packet. Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with what he's doing, but he's worked out something.
He's creative.
Okay? There's opportunities there. So there's all this kind of stuff that's happening, but it just takes a long time to work it out. And something clicked for me this year. I realised that in these neighbourhoods, our currency is relationships. And this is really important for you guys as social workers and as counsellors. Okay, when you're working in areas of poverty, the currency is relationships. What that means is that neighbours will tend to use whatever resources they've got to benefit relationships with people. Okay? So most of us, what we do is that we live in a house with a white picketed fence, and we go off to work, and we do our business, and we have kind of relationships with our workmates, and then we come home, and we have a few other friends, but generally we just kind of stay in our house. That's kind of the way we work. And then we use our money to build our security, to build our safety, to make ourselves financially secure. I'd say it's one of the idols that we worship as a culture in New Zealand. I won't go there because I'll start manifesting. So when we work in these neighbourhoods, you've got to understand that relationships is the currency. Now here's a classic example, two stories in my neighbourhood. Years ago when I was doing youth work in my early 20s, the mum that she was a little girl here, but she's a mum now, moved into our neighbourhood. She's a solo mum, has a nana living with her, has a mum living with her, has a kid. A 15-year-old on the run, just taken off, disappeared. She contacts me, says, Dave, can you come and help with the family situation that's going on here? I feel like a granddaddy of youth work now. I used to work with mum, now working with this 15-year-old. I get bored. But I realised that this family was really isolated. Okay, this family, mum was working, Nana had just trained as a social worker and was working, so there was 2 incomes coming into this house. But a crisis hit, and they didn't know how to respond to it. Yet there's a family just down the road, 1, 2, 3, about 7 houses down. 3 generations have been on the benefits. Crisis hits, and suddenly they're pulling in all these different people from all over the neighbourhood coming in, and they're responding to it. And they're sitting down together, solving the problem, working it out. Some are bringing food, some are bringing advice. And what I realised in this neighbourhood, that this one family that had lots of money coming in was actually poor. It's helped me to redefine what wealth is. Yet this other family, who we put a label on as being one of those welfare people, was actually incredibly rich. Had far more resources than the other family. So relationships are key. Now, for this asset model to work, what we have to do, what I have to do, is have to invest a huge amount into relationships. Spend a lot of my time having cups of teas, okay, and just chatting and just getting to know and working things together. But what happens out of those relationships is we start to dream about the possibilities of what could be. Okay, and for instance, it wasn't last year, it was this year. There's so many stories that happened. There's a massive fight that happened on the skate park. Okay. 40 people involved. There was a knife, planks of wood with nails in it. Someone got a nail in the head. It all started off with this teenager, which is my next door neighbour, slapped his ears. Anyway, he just provoked a whole lot of others, and then it's on camera because we've got a CCTV camera. And you can see they all disappeared, and the crowd grows, disappears, crowd grows, and then boom, there's this massive fight. Some of the nanas got really concerned about it, and they called a community meeting. And because we had built some relationships together, we knew each other, we could call this meeting, and together we sat in a circle and we started to explore what can we do to keep our mokopuna safe. That was the main philosophy around it. What can we do to keep our mokopuna safe? And so that's an ongoing discussion that was here. We started to dream about the possibilities. And then together we start to plan. And then after planning, there's a project. And action. Something happens. Now, this is very different from what happens when you usually work with a social service provider. Okay? Or you work in government or walk in council or something like that. Because generally what happens is you can flip this triangle around the other way. Boom. Okay? And what happens is, like I said before, there's all this brainstorming stuff that happens, and we come up with this action that we're going to do. Okay? And then we hope that the action is going to attract people to it. Churches do this all the time. Let's run this program, and let's hope that connects with people in the community. And they'll come to this program, and then they'll get involved in a food bank or counselling service or play groups thing, and then maybe from that they'll come to church. It's a trap we easily fall into. Why is it a trap?
Because there's no relationship with your connection.
Yep. So no relationship to start off with, so we've made a whole lot of assumptions.
Because there's always life crisis that if you're not healthy, the community takes away, the relationship can help. If that's big enough, it'll help go through those extra crises.
Yep, sort of, yep.
It's doing it the historical way, bringing money in, that's not always in the community.
Yep.
It does create reliance and dependence.
Yes.
But how does this model bring in?
Yes, so you hit a key point there. It brings dependence upon a system. Now, we've got a welfare system in New Zealand, Okay, a lot of the parts of the world don't have it. Okay, the welfare system is creating dependency upon social services to solve our problems. Okay, so crisis will happen. We'll pull in. I mean, I've got a mate down the road. He, I went to visit him the other day. I had to line up behind 6 other social workers because they all had pulled the service around him to solve all his problems. He's just lost his kids, actually. I think they find they've had enough after pouring thousands and thousands into him. They told him you've got 6 months to get yourself drug free, otherwise you're not having your kids back. But what that model does is that the experts come in with the action plan, okay? And it doesn't necessarily bring a lot of change apart from reinforcing that experts are needed and that I can't solve this problem myself. What this does is it starts to say that the experts actually live in these neighbourhoods, okay? And create a space for people to start to believe that they are the experts, then something magical happens. And they call it exchange. People don't change, but there's a process of exchanging that happens. Because what happens is that as people start to dream together, they start to pull in their own resources to make the dream happen. And just like what Jesus did, you know, one step, Jesus, I need to be healed, or the cripple, or the blind person yelling and screaming, or the woman that was bleeding, who came in through a crowd, unclean, but screamed and screamed. The crowd told her to shut up. She wouldn't shut up. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. One step. And then also, or someone walking alongside with another step. It's not a problem, you know, with your food basket and my food basket, people will not go hungry. Okay? This element of exchange is actually what brings change. So there is a danger if we flip this around. If this happens, it actually is a lot more sustainable. Okay, you'll learn all these magic words if you're into contract stuff. It's all around sustainable outcomes and all that kind of stuff. It's a fun game to play. Not.
Yeah. Just one question, sorry.
Yep.
If you have that working model and where do you access funds from social development? If you needed them for that community, do you set it up, get it going, and then say, hey look, this is working, can you support this existing stuff?
Yeah.
Or do you just forego the funds that could be available?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the tension. If you have too much funds, it brings it down. If you don't have enough funds, you can't do what you need to do. So, one of the reasons why I joined Urban Neighbours a Hoe, and that's quite a process. It's 3 years. You do apprenticeship and then you become a member. But this valve of poverty is quite important, and we also limit how many hours we work, 20 hours max if we're going to work, and bring in faith support, so have people supporting us. Because it's the belief that at work we give our best, and then we give our spare time to anything else. So we want to reverse that and say, let's give our best. And the hours between 8 and 5 is usually our best time, the most energising time. And so what that does is it just releases a whole lot of skills. If you get some of this process stuff, that we can then pour as part of the element of exchange.
So can you just clarify,
5 minutes.
You say you work 20 hours. Do you work 20 hours within your organisation of,
Probably work
or you mean
60
20 hours in
hours.
another doing something else?
So what I work is 24/6.
Yeah,
Okay, so we are around 24 hours
yeah,
for 6 days, and we have 1 day off, which
Yeah.
is actually today. Monday's my day off, so an exception today. And then you end up responding to the needs of the community with boundaries.
so this week you're talking about that's 24/6 is...
I go and work for another organisation. I have a part-time job.
Okay, so that's not your... I'm a bit confused.
So I have
What-
2 buckets.
Yeah,
One bucket that brings me some income is I can
Yeah.
do up to 20 hours. I
up
do
to
about
20 hours,
10
yeah,
a week.
okay, yeah,
Okay, and then the other bucket is I have a whole lot of people who give $10 a week or $5 a week or
yeah.
$30 a month. And
I look
Support
after
your
you.
work.
to support the work and to support us as a family.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
We have
and
a
then,
certain amount that
and then you're working with the local people.
That is it.
and then I give my work to the local people
Yeah.
free, even though they get paid for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just realised we've got a couple of minutes left. Still 2 o'clock. This is our skate park. It might be quite hard to see, it's a bit dark. But one weekend it got absolutely smashed with graffiti. So 3 days before this it was clean. Over the weekend it looked like that. Completely and utterly smashed. So I asked our young leaders, because we do a lot of work around leadership development, what does the skate park represent to you? And they said this. They said it's unsafe. So this park is unsafe. There's violence. There's gangs. There's a bit of creativity, but it's not that great tagging. It's a hood. And kind of at the end of this brainstorming, we agreed that this was poverty. And so then I said to them, well, okay, let's pull out the Bible and said, and Jesus in Luke 5 says, I've come to preach the good news to the poor. That was him making a statement about his whole, right at the start, of what his purpose was. So let's just change that a little bit, and stay with changing the gospel. Let's change that a little, say, Jesus has come to bring good news to Ramwood Park. So what is the good news? I asked these 20-year-olds. There's 12 of them. And this is what they said. I'll read it to you. They saw the good news to mean safe and beautiful streets, good education, decent housing, and access to good health, employment, strong family units, places to belong and to participate in, food for hungry children, leadership, connection with God, and the healing of families.
Amazing. Sad.
And I was blown away, because most of these guys are either brand new Christians or they're not Christians. But they defined what the story of salvation is all about. One night. Much better than I could have done it. And I said, why? To myself. It's because that struggle is their struggle. And I've been lucky to be invited to participate in that struggle. And I think the challenge for all of us is to understand that poverty in New Zealand, the gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we need people to be on the ground, to connect and to talk and to empower. But we also need people to be up with the policies and challenging the political system, and to be part of our councils, and to be challenging the systems that happen there. We need people who are really intelligent, that can work out how to bring change into all these areas, as well as the institutions. This is the ecological system. You'll study that by now.
Very often.
Okay, so at all those different levels, we need people who understand about injustice and are willing to work the system so that God's kingdom can be established. And when I think of justice, just to finish off, I think of a river flowing down, and down that river are a whole lot of babies, and they're floating down the river. And when I come along, I look at them, I see all the babies, and I go, oh no, not babies, and run and pick the baby out. Save one. Let's start your story. Grab the next one. Save the next one. Grab the next one. Save the next one. There's more babies, more babies. Hey guys, come. Guys, come, get the babies. Don't let the babies float out the ocean. Suddenly there's 100 babies screaming, needing their nappies changed. Whoa, they're going to find more people. Come and change the nappies. Come and feed the babies. More babies floating now. Help. What did we miss out doing? Nobody walked up the river to see who was throwing the babies in, and why the babies were being thrown. And we need people to start, especially us Christians, to start asking those questions, because we don't ask them. Very few people ask them. And then those that ask them, very few start to do it. change the education system so it's more available.
Yeah.
Make sure overcrowding is not happening. You know, I was at a SIS meeting last week, and this this mum, this married couple, where the kids had complained to school that they had been hit at home, and the kids had been removed. And I was at this Samoan family, so the whole thing was done in Samoan. I was lucky I had a friendly translator for me, and I asked permission to speak, and I said, how many people live in this house? It's a 90 square metre, 3-bedroom home. Standard crappy bloody stuff that's been built in our neighbourhood. I don't know why we allow those kind of houses to be built. 10 people live in it.
Jeez.
And I think, what do you expect is going to happen
Mm.
in that kind of intensity in this shitty home? You're going to get those tensions. So come on, guys. Let's try and find a home with 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms so this family can at least breathe and work things out. So said, no, it's not our job.
Mm. Mandate.
Forgotten where I was at. Look, mercy welcomes the hungry to gather around God's banquet table. Justice addresses why some are under the table aching for hunger, while others are sitting on the top of the table aching for gluttony. Mercy seeks and saves those lost in the darkness. Justice asks, why is it dark? Who's keeping it dark? And who is benefiting from the darkness? Is it I?
Mm.
Is it I? And I like this one. Mercy wipes away the tears from their eyes, and justice asks, why are you crying? Why are you crying? I think when I was counselling, I'm going to throw this in just to stir it up a little bit. I had a client say to me, Dave, would you still love me the way you love me in this room if you weren't getting paid? And she stopped me in my tracks when she said that. She said, oh, what makes you say that? What feeling? And then someone else said to me, Dave, if you have a look at the list of your clients, how many of them have professionals in their lives and how many of them have real friends? So I pulled my files out and I started to look through my notes. And I realised that heaps had professionals, very few had friends.
Mm.
And then my friend said, social workers and counsellors, there's many of them. But we lack so many friends. We lack true friends. And I think, trained to become counsellors, trained to become social workers, understand the system of how it works.
Mm.
But I think the greatest gift that we have as Christians who love Jesus is to be a friend. A friend with someone who has suffered the oppression and the injustice that's in our country. And walk alongside them. Feel the pain and the struggle that comes. And see the joy that comes as they take the steps to break the cycle of problem. It's 2 o'clock. Any questions? Yeah.
Dave, what role does building self-worth play in that relationship?
Yeah. I define self-worth and self-confidence as being quite different.
Yeah, me too.
So self-worth comes from seeing who we are in the eyes of God. So when someone shows the signs of having low self-esteem, that's what I work on. And then also got to work alongside that around building self-confidence in whatever situation they're in, whether that's about being strong enough to say no to a violent relationship, whether that's about going to get some training, whatever it could be.
quite overwhelming just listening to you sharing and understanding a little bit by knowing some people who work with the contracts. How is it measurable? How can we, as participants in the community, advocate for a change in how the MSD operates on even now? Because those, you see, this for me, I thought social justice was going into a community, recognising what the need was, asking them what the need was. But I see so many people doing the same things. You know, the same community having 10 food banks or 10 community gardens. Why can't there be one community garden and one something else and one something else, and them all not fighting over the same funds? I mean, that for me, that's where my heart is. And you know, if you've been in this obviously for a very long time.
MSD is frustrated by it because they report in millions and millions and the stats keep stacking up. But the problem is that they haven't asked the questions that the system that we've got. Is it the system actually that needs to be questioned? And so recently they've tightened up with the National Party. They've really tightened everything up, a lot more accountability now, and have chosen to now fund groups that do a lot more networking and groups that have a reputation for being a lot more proactive on what they do. So people are losing contracts, and that competitiveness is gone, and funding has, it's decreased massively under the national government. But part of it is that just there's not an alternative. There's not another option. And so they're becoming more and more aware of this community development stuff. And there's kind of an awakening to, maybe we need to look at this kind of model more and more. The issue for me is that because I live in a neighbourhood and I'm surrounded by neighbours, if I get these new contracts that are coming in, it puts me into a position of power, because I can define where it goes and what it does. And so I have to be very careful on how I manage that. In fact, I'm seen as I come into this neighbourhood with power because I'm educated and I've been doing this for a long time and I know how it works. I have to put myself under leadership of my community, so I've identified leaders and I go to them for advice on how to do stuff. If I had more time, I could show you kind of type of people that you look for, who they are. And I learn for the element of exchange again. They have so much to offer me and I have so much to offer them, and we work together on this kind of stuff. But I also have to, and we're lucky, we've got a good social service in our neighbourhood, a community house. So a lot of these new contracts that come in, we put them under there. It helps to keep me kind of more neutral and away from the power of deciding who gets what and who doesn't.
Thank you.
I'm looking at how you just described like the contracts and stuff.